Hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and update 22.12 has changed a lot of Warframes and weapons. Now, I've been thinking about ways to cover all of them without the videos being overly long and boring. And the most sensible thing I could think of was to simply split them into different categories, either by mastery rank or weapon type. So today we're gonna start it all off by looking at all the changes to primary launchers that were introduced with update 22.12. And the way we're gonna do it is we're simply gonna take these weapons into the simulacrum and see how they perform versus level 100 enemies, and I'm then gonna talk about how these changes may or may not affect your current build or playstyle and how you might want to build them going forward. Alright, so let us get started. So at number 1 we have the turret, where the most dramatic change comes in the form of the reduced reload speed, which went from 3 seconds down to 1.7. They also increased the fire rate and projectile speed a little bit, and they improved the projectile trail effects. The turret has always been in the upper tier of launchers. It's very powerful when modded for gas damage when you're going up against the corpus or even the infestate, and it's decently powerful when you mod it for corrosive and heat when you're going up against the Grenier. It does a solid amount of damage over a fairly large area, and it procs a ton of status. And you can easily use it to strip away the armor from the Grenier by simply layering the gas clouds on top of one another. Now, the reduction of reload speed on the turret is actually a pretty big deal, because the original 3-second reload speed was far too long and it did require a reload speed mod for the weapon to feel good, which is no longer the case. You can easily put on another damage mod and get far more damage from the turret than you were able to before. Also, while the increased fire rate isn't that noticeable, the increased projectile speed is really nice. It makes it far easier to hit moving targets. And at number 2 we have the Tonkor, and the biggest change here is the change to the lifespan of the grenade once it bounces. It will now detonate after 1 second rather than 3. They've also increased the projectile speed a little bit and the trail effects. Now, these changes may not seem like a lot, but the reduction of the grenade's lifespan is actually really good, because it makes it less likely for the grenade to bounce back and hit you. And even though the increased projectile speed counters that a little bit because the grenades just fly faster, it is still nice. And finally, none of these changes will affect the way you build the Tonkor in any way, shape or form. You still want to go for a crit build with 90% elementals. And at number 3 we have the Scourge, and all that happened here is that the damage from direct hits was increased from 30 to 70 on the primary fire. And while this is a pretty sizable buff and it definitely helps the weapon quite a bit, it is still not as good as the other two spears. The damage is just not quite there, even if you're headshotting the enemies constantly. But bear in mind, we're testing this against some of the tougher units from each faction, and they're at level 100. It's actually pretty nice at lower level missions because of the additional splash damage you get with the primary fire. And just like with the Tonkor, this will not change the way you build the weapon in any way, shape or form. You still want to go for a mixture of 90% elementals and dual stat mods. And at number 4 we have the Ogress, where the charge speed went from 0.8 seconds to 0.3 seconds and they increased the fire rate. This doesn't sound like a lot, and I wasn't impressed when I read the patch notes. I was like, well, it's still the Ogress, but oh my, it actually helps. A lot. I mean, just look at it. It shreds things so incredibly fast. And even if it doesn't, because every now and then you will fight enemies that aren't necessarily weak to the type of damage you're doing, it's still a crowd control cannon. This is all thanks to the reduction of charge time or increase of fire rate, depends on what you want to call it, because you can now go full on damage. You don't have to have a fire rate mod anymore. Also, I can no longer recommend the Napalm mod on this because it's been changed and it just doesn't work very well. So you can either go with a full on damage setup with 90% elementals, or what I did is go with full on dual stat mods for 100% status chance. Then at number 5 we have the Tzar, which has seen quite a few changes indeed. So they increased the status chance from 20 to 29 and crit chance from 15 to 17 on both the primary and secondary fire. They also lessened the effect of gravity on projectiles, so they won't have as much of a drop off, and they once again improved the projectile effects. These are some really good changes for the Tzar, especially for the primary fire, where status chance is actually really good because of the small bomblets. But the crit chance buff isn't too shabby either, because it just makes crits far more reliable. You can now build Tzar in two different ways. You can either go for dual stat mods if you want to use the primary fire because you get a ton of status procs with the little bomblets, or you can go with 90% elementals if you want to use the secondary fire where the status isn't as prominent. Either way though, this is a really nice buff for the Tzar. And at number 6 we have the Javelok, which has seen its mastery requirement increased from 6 to 7. They increased the damage from direct hits from 185 to 230 on the primary fire. They reduced the reload speed from 2.2 seconds to 1.9 seconds, and they removed the camera shake for when you throw the spear with the secondary fire. These are some pretty solid changes. The damage increase means that the weapon is far more viable in higher end content. The reduction of reload speed is nice, though it's more of a quality of life change because the original reload speed wasn't as bad to where you would have to use a reload speed mod, and the removal of camera shake whenever you throw the weapon with a secondary fire is just nice. The biggest change here is obviously the damage increase, which bumps it up a tier or two so it can now compete with a lot more weapons. Which is good. I would love to see these being used more often because I don't see people using them at all. And this once again doesn't change the way you build the weapon in any way, shape or form. You still have the choice of either going for crit with 90% elementals or for a hybrid build where you go for crit and dual stat mods. Though I'm pretty sure the crit build performs far better, especially with Argent Scope. And finally, in at number 7, we have the Secura Penta. And this baby has seen its status and crit chance increase from 10% up to 26% at the cost of losing 75 damage, so it now does 300 damage with each grenade. They also, for some bizarre reason, felt the need to reduce the ammo capacity from 30 to 28. Now, even though the damage did go down by quite a bit, this is still a massive buff to the Penta because you no longer have to build it for pure damage. You can build it for either status or crit or even a hybrid. This gives the weapon an insane amount of power because it now crits very regularly and it can be used to strip away armor, proc radiation, viral, gas, whatever you want, really. The way I decided to build it now is to go for a hybrid build with hammer shot and 190% elemental. This way you have 65% crit, 5.6 times crit multi and 88.3% status. But you can kind of build it however you want. You can still go for a pure damage build because it does more than enough damage to be effective on the star chart. You can go for a pure crit build or you can go for a pure status build as well. And that's it. Those are all the primary launchers that were changed with update 22.12. Let me know if you would like to see any changes done to the video in the comment section down below, because this is the first video of a pretty long series that's gonna come out over the next month or two, so it's better to iron out the imperfections right away. And I thank you very much for watching, as always guys, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.